Hi there, it's me, Ganny, of the RTGC Guild Wars 2 Guild. Welcome to this, my first guild video. So, this is called the Critters of the Crystal Desert. But, what kind of lore whore would I be if I didn't also give you a few juicy lore nuggets? Certainly not the kind that I am. So, peppered here and there will be a few pieces of lore and speculation. Don't worry, nothing here is a spoiler. Now, me and some of the other guild officers had gotten together and we decided, it might be a good idea to put some things together for those members of our guild who don't know much about Guild Wars 1 lore to help get you ready for the upcoming X-Pack. Now, in that light, I'm going to show you some of the Crystal Desert critters that we killed in Guild Wars 1. Hopefully getting you ready and raring to see what critters they bring back into Guild Wars 2. So let's get started with an easy one, shall we? These lovely critters are called Jade Scarabs. Now they're an insect race, no doubt related to the beetles that we killed in Guild Wars 2. They tend to travel in packs, much like a certain little raptor who will remain nameless. And just like that raptor, you'll often only see one, until you get there and all of his friends come bubbling out of the sand. Now, in Guild Wars 1, all critters also had professions, just like the players. The scarabs were necromancers, which gave them fun little abilities like chillblains, plague touch, and beast corruption. You may have noticed that whenever I'm fighting the scarabs, there's also another critter around. That's because wherever you find scarabs, you will almost always find rock-shot devourers. There are other mobs that they tend to group with as well, but they just love insects. So, but these devourers, of course, are rangers, big surprise. And as rangers, they love to use traps. They're also ranged attackers, and since we've seen other Devourers in Guild Wars 2 do the same, that's probably not going to change. Now, one piece of interest on this is that maybe they could become a Ranger pet. We already have Devourers as Ranger pets, so it would make sense for them to give us a Rockshot Devourer as one of our new pets, since it is part of the same family. Speaking of critters who can also become a ranger pet, how about these cuddly, scaly fiends? Sandrakes. Sandrakes are earth elementals, but one of their greatest abilities was their speed. They had a permanent 33% speed boost, so don't even think of trying to outrun them. Now, an interesting thing is that they're actually very reminiscent of a dinosaur called the Ankylosaurus. I don't think that's because they bite ankles, but who knows? Now, given that there's all kinds of saurians in Maguma, I think these guys have a special little edge of being added to Guild Wars 2. And since we already have drakes as ranger pets, I see no reason why we can't also have sandrakes as ranger pets. Now, speaking of dinosaurs, that brings us to another favorite type of critter from Guild Wars 1, the Hydra. Personally, I never really liked the Hydra. I mean, look at them. They're just three-headed T-Rexes. Still, wooden potatoes, and a lot of other people really like them. I do notice, though, that they seem to have an almost raptor-like plume on the top of their heads. All three of them. So I am looking forward to seeing if they do bring them back, and if they do, next up are the enchanted armors. Now, these, if they look a little bit familiar, it might be because they are, in a sense, the precursors to the Exalted. The armors were the foot soldiers of the Forgotten, much like the Jade armors were the foot soldiers of the Versat. Of course, not all of the critters from the Crystal Desert are ones that we haven't seen before. Take, for example, the Minotaurs. Now, you may notice that these models are quite different than the Guild Wars 2 ones, but these are also different than the Guild Wars 1 models from Gulag Lines. As a result, it's a pretty good bet that we may see Minotaurs with a slight model change. So, now let's go on to another one. Let's look at these guys. These guys are pretty easy to figure out what they are. They're riders known as Stormkin. The models on these never seem to change too much, but they are pretty freaky looking to begin with, so it's always nice to see them. I would think it would be pretty obvious that these guys would come along, simply because we already have them all over the place. And as always, they are Mesmers, of course. I know, big surprise. Not too much can really be said about these guys, since they are a major thematic mob found throughout Guild Wars. Another big theme in Guild Wars 2 are elementals. And what kind of elemental might inhabit the Crystal Desert? Well, a sand elemental, of course. These guys are far less impressive looking than some others, but don't be fooled by that. The 10-second blind that they can apply after an eruption can be very nasty. Next is another staple but rarity of Guild Wars, both 1 and 2, the Sand Giants. Now, don't be confused. These are not the legendary sand giant that you find in Dry Top. These are just common mobs, and they're scattered all over the Crystal Desert. But they're not really seen in either game in huge quantities. There are more in Guild Wars 2, I think, but still, giants tend not to be as popular. An interesting side note to these giants, however, is that when you killed them, they gave you a morale boost, which is something that you only got from killing a boss. These aren't bosses, but apparently they are big enough to pretend that they're bosses. So, now let's look at another standard, but one that's a bit more cute and cozy. That, of course, would be the Desert Griffin. A special note in these guys, the Desert Griffin is actually a warrior class, and it's the only warrior class in Guild Wars 1 for Griffins. But oddly enough, they do not use the warrior skill, Griffin's Sweep. So, if you're not into the whole cutesy thing, then we got something else for you. The Doom Burrowers. While a quick glance might make you think that they're some kind of worm, actually, they're a creature type called a behemoth. They're a ranger class critter, and they tend to be largely immobile. However, in Ilona, they seem to have evolved or maybe devolved into a form of bipedal creature, and much smaller. In fact, that version is not too far from the plated behemoth that we find in Guild Wars 2. Finally, we come to the apex predator of the Crystal Desert, the Sandworm. Truly giant in size, this warrior class worm has a huge stash of health and a constant +3 health regen. Not a nice combo, to be sure. Also, there is the fact that they tend to be lurkers. See? Just like that. You're walking around and suddenly you get hit by a huge knockdown. Just his friendly way of saying hello. So, those are all the critters of the Crystal Desert. I hope you enjoyed watching them beat the crap out of me. Just a few other things, though, that I would like to add on here at the end. While the critters are neat, there's a lot more than just homicidal wildlife in the Crystal Desert. One of those things are these huge bones. There's skulls and skeletons littering the desert floor. And they are, as you can see, of monumental size. Now, these are the remains of the Gigantus lupus, or elder giants. They certainly live up to their name, I must say that. These bones, however, create an odd mystery. Gigantus lupus, or as I like to call them, lupies, died out over 10,000 years ago, long before the Crystal Desert was even a desert. At the time when they lived, it was called the Crystal Sea, not desert. So why are all these remains here in the now desert? Well, it could be that these were just aquatic variants that died naturally in the sea. Another idea, however, would be that they died en masse in some disaster or war, their remains remaining hidden for thousands of years by water. When Abaddon turned the sea into a desert, these remains on the watery bottom would now have been exposed to the elements. If they were just aquatic variants, could there be some aquatic lupies still living in the endless ocean? If they died in a disaster, plague, war type of thing, what happened? I don't have any answers for you, just questions. Another of the interesting sights to behold here are these odd-robed figure statues. Now, these are probably Elonian in origin, but many of them have this glowy writing on them. What is that about? And how does it relate to them? I haven't seen anything that resembles this writing in my searches. The closest I came are some old Canton ruins, but none of them really seem to match up. They just sort of seem to have an almost thematic styling that is similar. Now, these things seem to tend to mark a path between some of the different outposts in the Crystal Desert. This makes me think that they were probably ancient Elonian pilgrims using them to mark the path to get to the Temple of Ascension. And if you're wondering what that is, then you obviously have not read my lore post. Go back and read it. It talks all about the Elonian pilgrimage. Whatever the case, though, they are interesting, at least to me. Also, you'll find a lot of these. These are some giant statues which have definitely seen some better days. And they're also scattered all throughout the Crystal Desert. The thing with these, though, is they are in some of the most unusual positions. They look almost like they're buried, which I just find really, really amazing. So maybe we'll find out more about those as well. We're pretty sure that these are Elonian in origin. One last architectural element would be the teleporters. Now, these are scattered throughout the Crystal Desert, and they allowed us access to areas that we wouldn't be able to get to otherwise. They're a pretty simple mechanic. You just stand there in the center of the glowing ruins, and yes, they do seem to bear a strong resemblance to the rooms on the hooded statues. Then you turn around and you look at the teleporter switches. You'll see them light up in a special sequence. Once you know the sequence, you step out of the circle, which deactivates the light show, and go touch them in that order, lighting each one up as it's touched. If you do it right, the portal will open, and you'll be able to zap yourself across to the other side. I definitely hope we have these in the new expansion. You know, when we got to Dry Top, they did carry over the vine seed pods to create vine bridges spanning vast chasms. Hopefully, they'll also keep these in for the same reason. So remember this mechanic, because you never know if it might reappear. One last thing I want to show you is this: the Forgotten. Now, the Forgotten, of course, lived in the Crystal Desert. And they did for a long time. So, I think that maybe the Forgotten will still be there. Or, maybe they're even going to be the way that we get, the reason that we get to the Crystal Desert. No matter what, though, you gotta admit, they are pretty amazing looking. And that's what I wanted to show you with them. So that pretty much takes care of everything I wanted to show you. Hopefully you learned a couple things, maybe had a little bit of fun, and until next time when we play with the lore by being whores, I'll see you then. Don't forget guild missions.